So if someone's feeling low desire, sometimes they're overwhelmed in their nervous system. So they're taking on too much, they're not taking care of themselves. And so sex feels like just another thing to do. And it's overwhelming. Just the idea of having to do something, having to show up for someone, especially when we're not showing up for ourselves. So I think a lot of it has to do with just slowing down, becoming more present, and taking care of yourself.
We hope you'll enjoy this interview with sex therapist Dr. Shannon Chavez. We talk about the mind body connection in sexual health, trauma, attachment, emotional safety, integrating holistic and evidence based care, relationship dynamics, and so much more. We even talk about working multiculturally across cultures around the world. And we have a super fun lightning round at the end that you don't want to miss. And you might even learn something new that you didn't know about Dr. Shannon Chavez. Welcome to Sexology Lab. Each week, we speak with the most compelling minds in modern sexology to ask the questions shaping the future of desire, connection, and human wellness. Let's dive in. Welcome, Dr. Shannon Chavez.
Thank you for having me.
So we live in a culture of high stress, constant stimulation, and digital overload. How is that impacting libido and intimacy?
It is all about energy, and everything you named can drain our energy. It takes our attention, it takes us away from being present in everyday life. And it's kind of normalized in our lifestyles, so it's not easy to just shut it all down. I mean, the way we work, the way we communicate, the way we stay in contact, the way we pay our bills, it's all done through these sources. So it's not that easy, but it definitely drains our energy. When I talk about libido, it's all about energy. It's all about life force. So if we don't have energy, how are we going to put anything towards pleasure and connection?
I want to hear your 30-second origin story. So I actually saw on Instagram that you did about this and I loved it. It's so much fun. So how did you find your way into sex therapy and when did you realize this was your calling? I believe it started at age 6.
Yes, it did. I always say it started in my parents' bedroom. A curious kid, I found this book, this incredible book, The Joy of Sex. It was a very famous book in the 70s and 80s. And I became really curious about sex. I didn't think of it as something negative. I knew it was for adults only. And it became just something that I wanted to know more about. And I knew it was something, again, private and maybe a bit taboo, especially in my culture. But to me, it was just interesting and it was so fun and exciting. And so becoming a sex therapist was interesting because even in grad school, I remember being one of the only students that was interested in specializing in sex. And I thought that was so surprising, especially people wanting to work with couples or marriage and family therapy. Nobody wanted to talk about sex. So, of course, I was the one student like, hey, I'll take the job. This sounds pretty great.
Oh, I love that. That is such a good story. All right. Now you integrate behavioral health, holistic wellness, and sexual medicine. What drew you towards such an integrative approach rather than strictly traditional clinical model?
I actually had a really great first job opportunity. So I worked in this clinic in Arizona that was all focused on women's sexual health. So it was myself, a gynecologist, a pelvic floor physical therapist, and a massage therapist. So we had this sort of med spa model where people can come in and have a one-stop shop to meet with every type of professional. I loved that because a lot of my clients were dealing with the frustration of being referred here or you need to see this person. And then it felt overwhelming and they didn't know what was going on. And so this model I loved because it addressed every part of our sexuality, mind, body, relational. And to me, it just makes sense because sex is not just a physiological or a mental issue. There are so many factors that we have to address. And integrative medicine really is the key, I think, to holistic health. We have to look at so many different factors when it comes to balancing our bodies out, getting ready for any type of pleasure and connection.
So what is the most important thing professionals need to know in this space?
Definitely do a lot of training and do a lot of personal work. I think that it's such a personal journey for anyone going in to get support around sexuality. So for professionals and the training that we do, it helps desensitize us. It helps us understand everything from a multicultural lens, all the different people that we're going to be working with. There's a lot of diverse populations addressing sexual concerns. So I think for professionals to be able to handle anything that walks through our door, we want to be able to have not only the education and background, but to develop those relationships. I think that's such a healing part of the work that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we're going to go back to talking about the nervous system for a moment.
Yeah.
So you talk about how stress and nervous system patterns impact desire and arousal. So can you explain what's actually happening in the body when someone says, I don't feel desire anymore?
Yes, I feel disconnection more than anything. It's so easy to get disconnected from your body. It could be simple things. Maybe we're going through health concerns, life transitions, even grief. I've been talking a lot about just emotional experiences that we go through and how it can create heaviness in the body. It can create a lot of mental overload. Disconnection. We're disconnected from the simple things in our life. And I talk a lot about getting people to connect with simple play, passion activities, or it can be, movement. Just getting into our bodies is such an important part of balancing the nervous system. We hear a lot about nervous system regulation. It's a big buzz, especially in wellness world, but it's simple things, just being able to tolerate a lot of the changes in our arousal. So if someone's feeling low desire, sometimes they're overwhelmed in their nervous system. So they're taking on too much. They're not taking care of themselves. And so sex feels like just another thing to do. And it's overwhelming. Just the idea of having to do something, having to show up for someone, especially when we're not showing up for ourselves. So I think a lot of it has to do with just slowing down, becoming more present, and taking care of yourself. And I know we hear a lot about self-care, but simple things of taking care of yourself, tuning in, just noticing what's going on in your internal world, the environment that you're in. There's a lot of simple factors and changes that we can make that make a big difference. That desire is more at a continuum as well. It's not just going to switch on or switch off, but what can we do to create shifts and changes? It's a lot of the work that I do with my clients.
Yeah. So, like, where does someone start if they're overwhelmed, if they've got a million things going on and they feel it? They feel it in their nervous system. They're like stressed out. So, what are some first steps you would recommend for someone?
Sometimes I normalize that because I think sometimes we need a little permission to say, yes, what you have going on is a lot, and anyone would feel overwhelmed with all of that on your plate. I always look for energy drainers and gainers. So even with a lot on our plate, where are we losing energy? And it could be simple things, even our self-care activities, TV at the end of the night, or things that we're doing that aren't really boosting our mood. They're not really helping us with energy. Also the gainers, there's simple things that a lot of people can do that can make them feel good. So it could be movement. I talk a lot about movement in my practice. So simple things like stretching, just being in your body, listening to music, dancing while you're making a meal in the morning or cooking dinner. So simple things that you can do to just get embodied, that can be really helpful. Also, I think when people are overwhelmed, it seems like I need to fix something, right? I have to take this off my plate, figure out how to balance, and that can feel like more overstimulation and activity.
That's like one more thing you have to do.
Right. And who wants to do more tasks to organize yourself? I think a lot of the times it's just about being more creative with your energy. So if we have a lot on our plate, sometimes that's not changing. So we're not going to fix that, but it's our mindset. It's how we look at that. Are we stressing about those things? Are we anticipating that all of these things have to be done perfectly? Oftentimes I just give my clients permission to allow things to just be as they are and to be able to process and talk about that. And that means to be able to just unload and to think about having that space to just be okay with things not being perfect, not being done. Being in overwhelm doesn't necessarily mean we have to fix it, but just to allow yourself to get back into balance. And I think balance is so important, especially with desire issues, especially with issues around sex. We have to think of creating spaces for ourselves in our energy. So that's important with shifting our mindset.
Yeah, definitely. And I've heard before that like there's good stress and there's bad stress. People inherently think that stress is bad, but there's the good stress, the things that energize you, but then there's bad stress. And those are like the things that drain you. And this sounds a lot like that.
We're stressed about stress. I think just the word is stressful. And it seems like something we've got to figure out and fix. But you're right. I always tell people we come into the world in a stressful way, right? From childbirth to all the things that we're developing in our life. So we're kind of built and resilient for stress. But the thinking aspect is what creates the overwhelm, right? I'm always thinking about all the things and allowing ourselves to just sort of do and be is so important in the mindfulness and the balancing that we have to do in our day-to-day lives.
Yeah. What's one tip you would give someone to be more mindful?
I would definitely say more play in one's life. So if we're playing, we're present, and that can be simple things. Even something simple that you're doing. If you're eating a meal in the morning or any hobby that you're doing, I think mindfulness is all about presence. And often we're not even enjoying the things that we like doing because
Yeah.
we're feeling like we have a little time crunch and we've got to get through it. And so simple things like that. And honestly, it's been tough for me as well. The idea of slowing down. I know I speak this to my clients often, but slowing down. I've done that even in simple things that I'm doing. So if I'm on a walk, I'll make sure I really enjoy that walk, really taking in the elements, taking in your environment, being able to just enjoy things. Even if I'm talking to someone in a conversation, just being really present and orienting to the experience and how good it feels to just enjoy that conversation before moving on to the next thing.
Yeah, I love that you said that. Sometimes just like the tasks all line up and you just have to remind yourself to be in the moment and be like, hey, this is what it's all about. We like doing these things.
Exactly. I mean, we spend so much time stressing and thinking about the things that overwhelm us, right? Often joy or happiness, we never rush those emotions, right? We're never thinking, oh, I've been so happy this week. I really need to move on to something else. But that's sort of presence as well, being okay with whatever emotion we're feeling, whatever our state of mind is, even if it's overwhelming. Because you made a good point. We're enjoying something, it can still be overwhelming. We have capacity to feel many things at one time. So it doesn't have to be only one state that we're moving in and out of. And I think that's important. We can be overwhelmed, but also really enjoying the experience, or we can be slowing down, but also really amped up and excited. So it doesn't have to be one way or the other.
Absolutely. And now, hormones and stress and even trauma really impact sexual function and desire over time. So, how would you say those things all work together?
They definitely affect our brain body connection. And I think that's what I want a lot of people to understand is just the connection of how all of that works. I mean, our vitality and our life force, that is our libido and the energy we put towards things that we desire, are all impacted by that relationship. So that's why the integrative approach is important as well. If we're just focusing on hormones or just focusing on this aspect of our health, we're not really getting that balance. So I think all of those different things are communicators. They give us signals, they give us information in our body. So if something is out of balance, we're going to notice that. Even if we're feeling our body isn't responding the way it used to, especially around pleasure, that's a signal from the body. I try to help people not look at that as a problem or something we have to fix, but let's look at it as a signal. What is your body communicating, and how can we help to understand that communication and support it, especially if we might need something like medical intervention or something specific to help create that balance, especially with hormones. We hear a lot about this is what works for one person, or this is the gold standard when it comes to health. Everybody is different. And that's what I tell people about sex therapy. It's about relationship building. The first relationship is with your body. So understanding your hormones, getting information, and even taking the information that you're receiving and being able to apply that to yourself in more effective ways, because it can be overwhelming. We're constantly going through changes in our hormones too. I tell people that every single day. So it's not one thing or the other. Same with mood, same with everything. Our energy is constantly shifting. You can go from feeling great in the morning and then the afternoon, your energy can tank. All of that is normal, but we're used to sort of finding this perfect point that doesn't really exist.
Oh, I love that you said that. Yeah, there is no perfect point. So, what are some signs that a sexual concern is really like a nervous system issue rather than a relationship issue?
If it's a nervous system issue, it's the way that we're responding to it. So obviously, if we're in an overwhelmed nervous system and we're feeling just tension and even the anxiety or even the anticipation of dealing with that concern feels overwhelming, we want to address that first. I always say, even if it is a relational issue, we're going to look at individual functioning first. So obviously, our nervous system responds to everything in our environment. So our partner is included, but we have to look at ourselves first. What are you dealing with in your environment that may be causing that overwhelm or overstimulation. And it could be simple things. It could be not getting enough time alone, not getting time to even process or be present with what's going on in your own internal world. And so I always recommend people reflecting on that first before going into partner mode and over communicating. I always say there's three things that I see couples doing: over communicating, obviously trying to bring a lot of emotional regulation to partnered communication first before any self processing, and just looking at problem solving more than anything, rather than just being able to be in a state where we can normalize that two people are rarely going to be in the same place at one time, but that it's okay for one partner to be here and there. And it's that ebb and flow that we want to get used to.
Definitely. And I've noticed having that nervous system dysregulation, it's not necessarily a relationship problem with us. It's I need to take some time for myself and get back to a calm place before we move forward with anything.
Yes, definitely. And I think a lot of couples too, what we think of as emotional support and learning how to be with one another's energy when it is out of balance. I think we don't really learn that. We learn to, what do I say? How do I react to it? What am I supposed to do? We don't really learn that emotional resonance early in life, but intimacy really creates a great space for it, which I love. When couples can sort of learn that, there's a lot of attachment healing that can happen there. Learning emotional support, I think, is a big part of intimacy work. A lot of the times it's just being present with it. Sometimes I'll have couples just sit in a very close proximity and make eye contact, notice what's happening in their own bodies as their partner's sharing, rather than go into, how do I respond? What's that tool I learned once in couples therapy? Am I reflective? Oftentimes, many people have never had just someone being present as we're sharing our emotional space or what's going on in our internal world. That can be so healing.
Are you curious about sexology? Do you want to further integrate sexology into your work or your life? Well, friends, then we've got something just for you. It's called the Sexology Practice Guide, and it walks you through the ways this shows up in your work, in your life, and guides you through working within your scope, incorporating intimacy and sexual health into your work without starting over. Download this short, practical guide at sexologylab.com/guide. That's sexologylab.com/guide. And while you're here, make sure to subscribe and share. And now, back to the show.
Sometimes I criticize the traditional couples therapy model because it's really focused a lot on communication and skills and tools and fixing. And I think that creates so much anxiety for people to come into a space where they are holding space for one another and feel that they have to say the right thing. Or what if they don't resonate with what their partner's saying? Or what if there is disagreement? Now we say, let's agree to disagree. That is such a big part of intimacy work. We're rarely going to be at the same place at the same time. But what if we just agree to disagree and allow those perspectives to be what they are? And curiosity, I talk a lot about that. We're often not curious about feelings. We're trying to fix them, make them go away, move through them. And so changing the way that we even come together and deal with some of the things that are very normal in our day-to-day lives can help create some really powerful shifts in couples.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I'm curious, how does attachment style show up in the bedroom?
I love this. I mean, I love the Esther Perel quote, how we were loved is how we love. So it's everything from our touch style to how we tolerate different energies and shifts in our emotional world, even pleasure activities, what we find pleasurable, the types of connection that we crave. So attachment has a lot to do with that. It gives us sort of this working model of how we see love, receiving love, giving love, even the idea of our roles in relationship. That could be gender roles. It could be what we think we're supposed to do. So it really influences our behavior. It influences how we show up for each other and our motivation, our obligations, our expectations of one another. So I love the attachment work. I think it goes really deep into our programming and it helps validate a lot of people's experience. And it can be changed. I think people may think, oh no, I'm this attachment style or I had this upbringing and what does this mean about me as a lover or partner? But we evolve so much in our attachment throughout our lives, just being in community, being in different types of relationships, even platonic relationships. So there's a lot of evolving in our attachment that does help us heal a lot of our wounds, but also become better lovers and partners over time, which I love to see.
Absolutely. And so this next question, I think, really relates to that. Like, what role does emotional safety play in sexual satisfaction?
Emotional safety is huge. I don't think it's talked enough, especially in our field. And again, it has a lot to do with the nervous system. Emotional safety is where we start to feel more receptive just to be able to be in presence with someone else. And it can be many things. I mean, I think a lot of the times it's stereotype. It's something that women need more than men. And I think right now, a lot of my practice, I'm focusing a lot on men's intimacy and the fact that they've sort of been programmed to shut down those needs. And we all have needs around emotional safety. Even animals have needs around emotional safety. So this is something that we're all kind of wired biologically for. It's not something that's an elective that we can kind of decide whether or not we need it. It's so important foundationally for any intimacy to be effective and helpful, especially in how it shapes our desires and motivation. Lots of ways to get there with emotional intimacy, but I think it's understanding what it is and how it's really part of our primal self.
Yeah. And what are some ways that like a couple could build emotional intimacy in their relationship?
Eye contact,
Mm.
really light touch, just being in close proximity. Often when I'm working with couples, I even set them up in what I call a dyad, a different formation, so that when they're even communicating or sharing in a vulnerable way or sharing something really important that might be about their needs or desires, the way that they're receiving each other, looking at each other, focusing on their breath and body, a lot of that can create emotional safety. If there's barriers between us, if we're in a very mental cognitive place, we're not really going to hear or understand what our partner is sharing with us. So that can create emotional safety. Also, normalizing helps a lot. I think if we feel that our needs are so different than our partners, I always say it's the lawyer dilemma. We feel like we've got to build our case and we've got to convince the jury that we are right on this. So it can be just simple things. Oftentimes, even if two people are completely on opposite ends, I'll say you're kind of experiencing the same thing in a different context. So I think that can help create emotional safety. Our emotional capacity is not very different from one another. I usually tell people we're only feeling maybe 5 to 10 emotions on a regular basis. Our realities are not that different from one another. So we can help bring that as something that bonds rather than creates barriers.
It's so important to realize that you and your partner might have different emotional safety needs, and that's okay. Like you can be different. You don't need to have the same needs.
Yes. And we learn so much of that in relationship. We all come from very unique backgrounds. So we do so much of that healing work in our relationships. Even if we're coming from a place where we feel like we're on completely opposite ends of the spectrum, it can still create good compatibility. And I think that question comes up a lot when I work with couples.
All right, I want to talk a little bit about trauma. So, when working with trauma survivors, how do you help them reconnect with pleasure?
Yes, setting really small goals. I think a lot of education first, because with trauma, there's been a lot of maybe focus on the experience of the trauma or the processing or cognition around the trauma. Getting them back in their body is so important. And pleasure often feels like another big step or goal that can feel overwhelming, especially pressure, right? I'm going into therapy and we got to overcome this thing to get to this particular point. So getting back into the body and understanding pleasure is not just again stimulation and feeling good. Pleasure can be just sort of being present and being able to love your body again, to trust your body again, to learn these simple skills and able to embody and be connected with something that may have been violated or taken away. So I think that's really important in trauma work. There's so many great techniques. That's what I love about this sort of trauma movement is we're really moving back into the body and talking more about mind body work more than ever. And I think that's so important when gaining back your relationship with pleasure and taking away the goal and performance issues, as we know, but also, feeling that delight, being able to find things that kind of spark those moments of joy or those moments of arousal and being able to kind of track that and notice that happening in day-to-day life, especially in non-sexual situations, because making those connections is really important. I find a lot of trauma survivors, there's very much a disconnect from that. Here's pleasure and what sex is and all of this over there. And then there's sort of these other areas of life that I don't see as connected to pleasure and joy and that type of presence that I want to build with sex and pleasure. So I think that's a really important piece to kind of bridge in order to make it less daunting and overwhelming in the healing process.
And now, is there a common mistake that sex therapists make when working with trauma and sexuality together?
A mistake I sometimes see is kind of jumping into the experience of the trauma or the processing of the trauma or using a very kind of cognitive behavioral lens. I often think it's kind of building those intimacy skills first in session, building that trust and resonance with the client, creating even the ability to kind of have that limbic resonance or emotional space of safety, even in the sessions, or if you're working virtually, building that first. The slowing down, because I think people come to therapy thinking I'm going to have to talk about my trauma and reliving the trauma. A lot of just body-based work is what I do first, helping people just be present in their body. I do a lot of somatic experiencing, just helping people sort of resonate with what goes on even in our bodies as we're retelling or talking or sharing things that are vulnerable. And that's not just our trauma and our history, but also sharing the things that we desire, even our motivation for wanting to heal from these experiences in our life.
And now, if there are professionals out there who are curious about holistic integration, but maybe a little skeptical of it, or they're not really sure like what it's all about, what would you say to them?
Say that there's many different ways to approach it. Integration in different modalities and different disciplines doesn't mean that we have to work any particular way. It just means being able to look at whole person health, that it's not one area or one concern, that there are many factors that affect wellness and well-being. So get some training, talk to different doctors, even look at your own health and wellness. What are you doing in your life to take care of you and what's worked, what's really inspired you? I've gone through my own health journey that has really opened up this holistic lens, working with professionals and doing my own research and figuring things out that work for my body that have kind of sparked this curiosity and interest to want people to approach this type of work more. So it's a growing field. So expose yourself, be curious, explore. There's many different ways to do it. Everyone is doing it in their own unique way, but all ways are great.
Yeah. And now, as a professional, how do you decide when to focus on cognitive interventions versus somatic or more body based interventions?
I'd say, every person is different, and a lot of it has to do with their readiness, their education and background, what they sort of know, the work they've done already. Some people kind of come in and they have a really good basis for starting a more integrated plan, but I kind of mix it all in eclectically. I really think all of it is important and it really works together rather than one working first and sort of starting here's step one, step two, step three. I think it's about kind of pulling it in and personalizing it to who you're working with and their background. I also work a lot from a multicultural lens. So I'm doing a lot of work now, just helping to create a different perspective of even self-care coming from our culture and our background. That can be our lineage, our history. So it has to be personalized. I think this sort of cookie cutter model of therapy or how we've worked in the past, even my field of psychology, is really outdated. We've got to adapt and move forward. We're seeing a lot of that in the field, which is great. It's time and it's definitely overdue.
Yeah, and I want to talk to you more about the multicultural aspect of your work. So, you're licensed in multiple states and you work globally through coaching and consultation. So, how has that expanded your understanding of cultural influences on sexuality?
It's huge. It's probably just the most rewarding part of my work. Where we come from, our background, our history, it's in our body and our nervous system. It's in our programming. So we don't look at that and understand that and integrate that into how we're working with clients. We're really limiting our own understanding of how to help them integrate that into their lifestyle. And that's everything from, the food we eat to our practices, traditions. I'm doing a lot of work around rituals and the things that are important in everyday life. And I love the multicultural work because you'll see that no matter how vast and different a lot of us grew up and how we're programmed, there are a lot of similarities in what our needs are. And so I love working with people from other places, especially, if they didn't have a lot of the resources that many of us have. And maybe it was the lack of education or the way that their communities were set up that influences so much of our thoughts, our beliefs, how we approach sex, how we experience grief, shame, all of these big emotional processes. So it's really important. And I wish we would see more focus on that in our field. We are starting to, but I I
Yeah.
still think we have a long way to go. But I absolutely love that work. It's so rewarding.
I'm curious a little bit about the behind the scenes work. So, if you get your paperwork for your new client and they're in a different culture, somebody maybe you've never worked with somebody in that region or area before, like what do you do? Do you do some research on your own first? Do you have a set of questions you ask that client, or is it a combo of both? How does it work?
It's definitely a combo of both. I love studying cultures and religions anyway. So if there's something new, I'll definitely do a deep dive into, what are some of the customs and traditions? What are some of the things that maybe they've been exposed to? So I understand what some of those mindsets might be, even their language. Language is so important. So in my assessment questions, I really want to hear in their own words. So
Yeah.
I'll have them sort of describe freely general questions about, their story, what's brought you here and what is sort of your interpretation of what's going on. And it's fascinating to see the words they choose, the way in which they describe it, and that helps me start to understand how to work with this client. Language is so important, even the resources and tools that are appropriate for certain cultures and religious beliefs, and that we as clinicians have to be really creative as to how we present our work to different populations. And I love that challenge because it's exciting to me to sort of see different ways and approaches we can work with people. The
Yeah.
cultural piece has to be integrated into how we work with sexuality.
Definitely. So you've worked with people all over the world. Like, have any patterns come up with couples who struggle with intimacy?
I would say the main pattern is just even being able to define what intimacy is. And for couples to come in who may be struggling with something, very common, let's say, desire discrepancy. And the pattern I usually see is that even if they've been married for a long time, they've kind of gone into this more traditional lifestyle, they've never really been given a lot of permission to talk about these things, or the gender stereotypes of what's okay and what's not okay. And when I see them come into a couples therapy setting and have that permission to be able to talk about it together, it's life changing. Definitely patterns around, limited education and how that shapes our beliefs and values. And also, I would say the pattern I see is not really understanding sexual values and beliefs, or being even asked that question. It's an early part of my assessment and history taking. And people will say, no one's never even thought about that. I don't even have any clue what that means. And so helping people develop that really early on, especially coming from different, more conservative cultures, is really great part of the work.
How do you describe sexual values and beliefs to someone who's never heard those terms before?
Yes, the things that are important to you. And I kind of broaden it to not just sex, but pleasure, right? And feeling good together, connection. So it could be simple things. I look at maybe their lifestyle. If they're married and they've had long-term commitment, those are part of values. And what shaped those values? Oftentimes, I think we adapt and adopt the values of our culture, or that's just what it's been, or our upbringing. But a lot of the times I really give clients and couples the opportunity to look at, do those values still hold true today? And are those things that feel important? A lot of those are very important. And I work with a lot of conservative couples. So yes, even those traditions and values that have been passed down, even though there might be shame or confusion in some areas, they're still really important to how they want to live their lives, how they want to raise their families. So it's just being able to identify them. It could be monogamy. It could be the way you orient to sex. It could be the types of connections that you find valuable in your life. It could be just the things that make you feel good. It's kind of exposing them to what values are. And then the beliefs are what we tell ourselves, and the things that we tell ourselves that then impact our body. So oftentimes they're very internal. We've never openly discussed what our beliefs are, but we usually look at all the different facets that shape that. And a lot of it could be things we've heard from family or religious teachings, or things that are sort of built into community and lifestyle in these different places.
And now a lot of couples were never taught like strong sexual communication skills. So how can partners strengthen those skills without making it feel clinical or forced or like really awkward?
I always say let it be awkward. It is weird. The words are weird. Finding your language, I think, is important, because we've heard so many different, maybe advice, or we read something, this is what you're supposed to say, or this is what sexual communication is. I would say it's kind of its own language that is going to be different person to person, couple to couple. So I give a lot of permission to develop that language. Let it be messy and clunky and awkward and weird. It doesn't have to be perfect. Our intention is to create space for those communications. And sex being its own language means that it's nonverbal as much as it's verbal. It's often the things that we're not speaking to that make the biggest impact. So it's not a one way or a top 10 tips that are going to work for every single person. And I think that I see such relief when we talk about just, okay, it can be this way, or the fact that we have to practice it. I always say we're born knowing nothing about sex and
Yeah.
communication. So we have to develop those skills constantly, and they evolve throughout our life constantly as well. So even if we feel like we're really skilled in sexual communication, we still have to learn it intersubjectively with each partner. So that's something that I think people also need permission around. It doesn't have to be perfect. Be open to figuring it out together. Develop your language together. That could be a hot erotic thing to do. And practice, say things. I do this with my husband as well. We'll say things and practice things in our communication that, might be kind of funny or silly, but I think that kind of breaks the barrier of it feeling so vulnerable or having to lead to some amazing outcome. And practice is really important.
I think it cannot be stressed enough how important humor and taking yourself not so seriously can be in those moments.
Especially with sex. Sex is really the weirdest thing that we do. It looks weird, it smells weird, it's all these things, and yet we try to romanticize it so much to the point where it really dampens the erotic. I mean, the erotic is meant to be kind of curious and obscure and fun and mysterious and exciting. So, yes, I love that. Permission to be awkward, get into your weirdness, allow yourself to kind of, build on that. And my husband and I definitely use that a lot, and it's been great in our relationship.
Yeah, I love that. All right, Shannon, before we wrap up, I want to do a rapid fire lightning round.
Here we go.
All right. So I've got a few questions. First thing that comes to mind. Okay. One myth about sexual health you'd love to retire.
That it is just about physiological health and functioning. So it's so much more than that.
Yes. One habit that improves intimacy instantly.
Slowing down.
Love it. One quality every great sex therapist should cultivate.
Patience in their own self-care.
One book every sexual health professional should read.
Ooh, Sex for One, Betty Dodson.
Good, good. What's a sexy place you'd love to travel to?
Ooh, well, it's on my list, Romania.
What's your favorite way to relax?
Music. Yes, big audiophile over here. So anything music related, that's my self-care.
Oh, I love that. It can definitely change your mood, just like flipping a switch. So,
Changes
big
your
fan of
mood,
that.
your energy, your body. I prescribe it a lot for my clients. So any client I'm working with, they'll know that music is a big part of their work and treatment.
All right, last lightning round question. What's one thing people would be surprised to learn about you?
I've been doing Krav Maga now for 12 years, and it's been a big part of my, not just exercise, but self-empowerment. I did it a lot. Started out as self-defense, but it's become just a big part of my hobby and training. I do it once a week for years now. And so people would be surprised to see me doing chokes and holds and boxing, and that it's just for a small, short person. It's a really fun activity. So people are usually surprised that it's something that I do.
Oh, that's incredible. I love that. And I did not know that about you. So
You never know.
now I'm curious to know, what did you think about the Sexual Health Alliance annual sexological conference this past year?
Well, it was actually my first Shaw conference, and I loved it. I mean, it was exactly what I wanted a conference to be. It was great speaking and education, diversity in topics, takeaways. That's the thing I've been really lacking in a lot of conferences, being able to go to an amazing conference and take away insights, theories, motivation that I can actually use in my practice. I have not taken that many notes at a conference in a very, very long time. And also just the relationship building. Sometimes I am not the greatest at networking, but I really loved the environment for networking there. I met so many new friends, people I've kept in touch with. So I will be back. And it was in my hometown. So I love that. I love that being a Coloradan that got to go home and visit friends and family.
Oh, I love hearing that so much. Thank you. All right. My final question for you. If you could leave one message for the next generation, so like our Gen Zs, our Gen Alphas, about sexual health and relational intimacy, what would that message be, and why does it matter right now?
To take control of your own pleasure. There are so many different messages out there, especially these younger generations that are just bombarded with information and social media and technology. Taking control means that, have your own narrative. become your own advocate, take control, be where you are, whether that being anywhere on that spectrum of sexuality. It's so important. There is no norm. You're going to figure it out for yourself throughout your life. It's going to continue to evolve, but take control of it. Let that be yours and not influenced by so many other things. I think
Yeah.
that's important for these younger generations. And they're already doing that. I'm already really
Yeah.
proud of them. They're doing it way better than we were.
All right. What a great message. Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Dr. Shannon Chavez.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye, everyone. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen. Links are in the description below.